Listen to Wrestling Up on FreeFM, ArrowFM, and MP. As always, I'm Grady, and live on Skype I got Josh.
Yo!
And welcome to another one of our episodes where we're going to be doing a top 10 list to cover over the holiday period while Grady is out of the country. The theme for this week's episode is top 10 female WWE superstars. Quite a wide berth to pick from, but where are we going to be starting?
To be honest, there isn't a wide range that would go from, because for the company's been in existence for over almost 100 years. Women's wrestling has only really mattered for 20.
Yeah, that's true.
And since it is just women and not women wrestlers, we are afforded a little bit of a luxury of picking valets. So I'm going to go with probably the most famous of all, Miss Elizabeth.
Fair enough choice. Someone who's, as you say, a valet, but like synonymous with a main event star, right? Was being seen week in, week out. And always positioned pretty high up. You know, we've had feuds over her, we've had feuds involving her. She was probably the most important woman, I would say, on that roster back then.
Yeah, she was absolutely beauty personified, and she took the Macho Man and made him even higher of a star. Once they paired her together, started bringing her on screen, that's what led to him getting to the top. And then the whole story with the way he treated her and stuff, and then you get the redemption arc at WrestleMania 7. And then the marriage and everything. She was perfection personified, and I would doubt very seriously that there wasn't many hot-blooded males growing up that didn't fantasize about her.
Yeah, she did look like she stepped straight out of a beauty pageant. And I think that's the whole beauty queen kind of piece really worked for her. As you say, without her, Macho Man would have been like missing a piece. Would he have eventually made it up to the same level of stardom? I'm not too sure, but was definitely helped out on his ascension by being paired with such a valet who, you know, as much as we'll harp on about her beauty and stuff, she knew what she was doing. She got the character over. She propelled stories, which is, you know, really in sports entertainment what managers are there to do.
Yeah. And she was a critical part in the Mega Power storyline.
Okay, that means it's my turn. I'll just jump to an easy one, which, you know, may generate some controversy. Probably not with you. I'm gonna throw Charlotte Flair out here.
I've said it multiple times. She is by far the greatest of all time for women. So yeah, having her on this list, perfect sense.
Yes.
Because she's literally the best. She makes every woman she works with that much better, and she is in such a level, it doesn't matter if she's wrestling for a title or not. What she does is important.
Mm-hmm.
She is the John Cena of the women's division. Plain and simple.
Yeah, you can make probably comparisons around their amount of world championships as well. The way you described about how, like, you know, the title doesn't need to be important. The important part is the fact that you're feuding with Charlotte. That does remind me of people like, you say, John Cena, people like The Undertaker, people like Brock Lesnar, where, you know, you're talking about, what's at this pay-per-view? What's going to be our World Heavyweight match, our WWE Championship match? What's going to be our Brock Lesnar match? And there is that, right? You know, in a division where we struggle to hold multiple feuds sometimes, and the title bouts are kind of crutches to try and do that. Charlotte can still hold plenty of stories without the titles. Even if she does end up around the titles quite often, it's still doable.
Let me just say this. Without Charlotte Flair, and the Becky fans can cry all they want, without Charlotte Flair being involved in that triple threat match, that main evented WrestleMania for the first time, it doesn't happen. That trio needed each piece to make it to that point. But Charlotte was huge in getting it over.
Yeah, I think, like, there are people who are gonna hate her for reasons. It's always been the case, I said, like, might be an unpopular inclusion, but it would be extremely insincere and just wrong to make a top 10 list that doesn't feature her. You can argue whether she's number one or whatever number you want to put her at. Luckily, our list doesn't have an order. We're just listing our top 10 in no particular order. But she's got to be there. You're kidding yourself if you don't put her in the top 10. But who else are you putting in the top 10?
Well, probably the person that influenced the most people that are going to end up on our list, Trish Stratus.
Solid choice. Yeah, I feel like we're going to end up talking about her counterpart a bit as well. But yeah, that was, at least for me, it's the generation I grew up with. And it is, I would say, number 1A and 1B from that generation.
Yeah. Trish was special from the standpoint that she was a valet, but she became so much more. And it is something to have been said that in an era where it was all about the men, all about the World Heavyweight Championships, that her and Lita main evented a Raw.
Yeah.
At a point where that was not to be expected. When we got to WrestleMania for the triple threat, that was kind of expected. That was the next logical step. That was not something that we expected when we turned on Raw and said, "Oh, this is our main event: Trish Stratus versus Lita for the Women's Championship."
Yeah, it's a very different time period. Like, I feel like if you're a newer wrestling fan, or maybe a younger wrestling fan that's only seen, Four Horsewoman, Asuka, Bliss, that sort of stuff in that generation, you probably don't want to, but do cast your gaze back to 2000s to understand what we're talking about. And, you can just read the match types. And I feel like that shows you how women were treated back then and before that as well. And they're just managing to be two shining lights. And there was quite a few of them as well. I think Trish and Lita get the two biggest props out of that generation, but I'm hoping that we end up talking about a couple of the other women from that generation as well, because there was quite a few there that were, what is the saying, making chicken salad out of chicken poop. They were given nothing, and they managed to, as you say, main event Raw, and just, by force of just having banger after banger, make people care about a division that was uncared for. Well, cared for, but in a vastly different way, not as a wrestling division. Which makes it easy, because I'll just go into my next one then, and I'll just go Lita. I'll just go her opposite. The two of them are synonymous with each other at this point. Whenever there's a return, one's around, the other's there. It was their main event of Raw. It was their feuds. Yeah, I would say 1B to Trish Stratus is 1A.
Yeah, I wasn't that big of a fan of Lita, but I respected her, and she could do a lot of things that men twice our size could not do in that ring. And I will say probably one of the maybe biggest regrets is her breaking her neck.
Yeah.
'Cause that significantly reduced her career. But at the so because that makes me wish that she had been healthy enough, she could have had matches with the likes of Beth Phoenix, early Natalia, stuff like that. That would have been absolutely fire matches. But she's a Hall of Famer for a reason, and she was perfectly fine and perfectly good.
Yeah, I think you put it right. I think she had, I guess, the more extreme style of the two, hanging out with the Hardy Boys for quite a bit, hanging out with Edge and stuff as well. Had a fairly lengthy career, but yeah, as the neck injury sort of cutting her short a little bit. Don't necessarily... She didn't get to see women's wrestling turn into what it could have been. But then did get to come back and do this run this year. And so, did get to still interact with the division, whether it be women's rumbles, whether it be one-off feuds, and I guess see what it has grown into in the past 10 years.
Yeah, she was the one that debuted the women's championship and announced the transition from divas to superstars. So... yeah, she's got her place in history, and she deserves to be on the list.
Well, who else deserves to be on the list?
Well, I won't say deserves, but she was a personal favorite of mine.
Look, we can throw whoever we want on these lists.
Yes. I'm going with Molly Holly.
I expected her to make an appearance.
Yes. Molly was... oh, God. She was special to me. I will say... she was probably the one I fantasized about, to be honest. She was, she did everything that they asked her to do. She did well. She pulled off that superhero gimmick pretty well with Hurricane Helms. And then she got them on a WrestleMania match by willingly giving up her hair just to be able to defend her title, when at that point the only thing that was going to be on the pay-per-view was a pillow fight.
Yeah, that's the story I'll always remember when it comes to Molly Holly. She was willing to sacrifice what's quite a big aspect just to get seen, just to get the woman a better spot. And so she might not be as out there in the front as, Trish and Lita, but that she was working her butt off. She was still getting featured. She was still sacrificing the same amount that everybody else had to build up this foundation, for women's wrestling that, got torn down multiple times, but, persevered and still built it to a point where, we could continue launching off towards the point now where, it's almost, the championship's on the same level kind of stuff. That is definitely not the case back when, as you said, you got to sacrifice your hair just to even get a match. Anything else you want to say about Molly?
Nah, because we'll be here all day if I do.
Got to end up cutting yourself off. You did talk about her a little bit when you were talking in the leader section about people she didn't get to fight. I'm going to throw out here Beth Phoenix. Again, we're sort of moving into a bit new of a generation. There's going to be a couple from here, I'm sure, that'll pop up. But Beth came out, had a slightly different aspect to her, that super strong, just dominate you woman. China-esque, and whether it was comedy with Santino, whether it was teaming up into women's tag teams, or whether it was just dominating the division, it felt like Beth could do it all.
Yeah, Beth was special. She was the China of her era. I absolutely think if she really wanted to, she could have wrestled with the men and put on banger after banger after banger with them, and she could have been an Intercontinental Champion. and nobody would have batted an eye against it because it would have been completely believable.
Yeah.
Her stuff with Santino Marella is legendary. I think Santino should be in the Hall of Fame just because he was a legendary comedic character. And I think that he benefited heavily from working with Beth. So Beth was great.
Yeah. I think, again, this is, if the Attitude Era was when everybody was fighting to just even get seen, this was the, like, make or break kind of era where women's wrestling could have gone one way, could have gone the other. They were sort of undecided. You were still having your pillow fights, but then on the other side, you were having Beth Phoenix, Natalia, and you're like, okay. And ultimately, they ended up choosing their direction, but I feel like you had to have strong proponents on the side to show, this is what women can do. You didn't just strike lightning once with Chyna. You could have done it again with Beth, and a bunch of the other women in this era as well. And yeah, it's a bit of a shame that she doesn't wrestle actively. Obviously, settling down with a family, has made a couple of appearances in Rumbles and other matches as well, but she still looks good. And, I'd be happy to see her in the ring anytime.
Mm-hmm.
Who's number 7?
I'm going back to the 4 Horsewomen. And I'm going with Bayley.
Alrighty.
Bayley was my favorite of the 4 Horsewomen. I admit that I had a crush on her when I saw her coming up. She is arguably, when she gets in the ring, she's as good as anyone has ever been in the ring. She has had so many the best matches with other women that it's insane. Bayley was such a beloved face until they got tired of her. That kind of happens to every face. And then she became one of the most hated villains in the women's history. All by destroying some Bayley buddies.
Yeah, I think she's done it both, as you say, from both of the extremely loved face, extremely hated heel. And you love it when somebody can work both of those angles. It's always good. I remember her debuting and even her early runs, and everyone was saying, like, she could never be a heel. We were only ever going to see her as a face. How could we boo her? Similar things they said about Sami Zayn as well. And then, yeah, she comes out and she wrecks some Bayley buddies, cuts her hair, and all of a sudden, we're booing her out of the building.
And the reason that we are able to boo her was because the character that she created was essentially a Karen.
Mm.
It wasn't full on, I want to see your manager, that's Chelsea Green. But it was, this is somebody that if you do push the buttons, they will go for the manager, but they'll cut your throat first if they can.
Mm.
And Bayley worked so well off of Sasha Banks. Whether it was them as a team or when she betrayed her, which was the surprise of everybody because everybody expected Sasha to be the one to turn. But no, they kept Bayley Hill, which was a good choice. And then they bring in Damage Control, and she's elevated Io, elevated Dakota, and now she seems to be getting kicked out of her own group. Depending on when this is.
Yeah, she might already be out.
She may have already been. And we have a perfect made story for WrestleMania between Io and Bayley. That seems to be where we're going. I think Bayley wins the Rumble. I think she completes her Grand Slam of sorts and gets a Rumble win.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bayley is arguably the 2 to Charlotte's 1.
I'm sure lots of people will disagree, but I'll just move swiftly on and throw out my next pick instead. I'm kind of cheating on this one. I'm taking a 2-for-1. Again, maybe a controversial pick, but I'm going to throw the Bella Twins on here.
I absolutely agree. I know people didn't like them that much for their ability in the ring, but they got better as the more ring time they got. Bellas were phenomenal characters. A lot of what people need to realize about the women's division is they drove it. They drove us to the point of the women's evolution because they were getting better, but the matches were still 30 seconds, 45 seconds. I once joked that they could have had the Bellas match in the time frame of a promo they had for Sting, and nobody would have missed it, and then the match lasted 20 seconds. And that's when the Give the Divas a Chance movement started.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that they were the element that you needed to get people interested in the women that allowed the platform that became the evolution of the women's division.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of elements in there. Like, you can't point to one single superstar or one single set of superstars and be like, they are the reason that the women's evolution happened. But you have to admit the part that the Bella Twins played. They were a catalyst. They were the bridge between the two divisions as well, or the two eras, I guess. And they bridged it really well. Obviously, they've both gone their separate ways away from wrestling at the moment. And there was some stuff, outside the ring with relationships that turned people as well. But the other piece that I want to mention while we've got the Bella Twins is don't underestimate the amount that Total Divas and Total Bellas did for the wrestling world either, in terms of bringing in eyes and a completely different audience to the weekly show, and highlighting, whether it was heavily scripted or not, which it was, different personalities and different people, and springboarding us a little bit as well in that direction.
Absolutely.
Who you got for the list next?
I'm going to go with China. I'm going to go with China, and I'll let you decide on which horsewoman gets added.
Oh no,
the last one. Because, but I'm going to go with China because I think she was unique. She was capable of doing so much, and they really tried to rebuild the women's division for her. Which is where we eventually got the Trish and Lita and Molly and Victoria and all that. And Jazz. There was a lot of good women, but China was the element to bring back the division, bring it forward from the 80s and modernize it. And she could go with anybody. She is the only woman in history to have held the Intercontinental Championship. That is something that cannot be taken from her at this point.
Until somebody else does, which won't happen anytime soon.
Yeah. It won't happen ever again because of politics. Yeah. You're not going to have a woman wrestling a man on a publicly traded show. You can have it done on AEW, but it's not going to happen in WWE because they're publicly traded. They will get eviscerated for it. But China was she was special.
I think you highlighted everything there, right? Like, there's a reason when a new big, strong woman comes through that they say that might be the next China. She again became an archetype for the women's division. And back in her time, there wasn't much of a women's division. And that's why she was, putting on bangers with Chris Jericho and feuding around that and doing the DX stuff. And ultimately was still, probably the highest profile woman around that time, just because of the storylines that she was involved in and the stuff that she was doing. And it worked.
The only woman that could touch her as far as the level was Sable. And Sable was all about sex. That's it. That was all she was about.
Vastly different people.
Yeah. So it was one of those things. It's just, that's what it was.
Yeah. Well, we don't have a huge amount of time left, so I'm going to do the cop-out and not annoy anybody for our last spot. And instead, do you have anybody left on your list that that didn't make it onto the top 10?
You're going to force me to pick one of them.
No, you can just list your people. I'll list my people, and then we'll be finished, because we've got 30 seconds left.
I'll go with Asuka.
Okay, that's a fair choice. I had Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, Michelle McCool, Bull Nakano, and Asuka as my last ones.
Yeah, I mean, Asuka is capable of doing anything in the ring. She's very talented. Yeah, I mean, we all know how I feel about Becky. We all know that. And we know how I feel about Sasha. So I'm not making. That's why I didn't want to make that choice. Yeah, so I'll cop out and go with the longest reigning NXT Women's Champion and one of the strongest Josies in history of the WWE.
No one was ready for her.
Mm-mm.
Alrighty, well, that is all we've got time for this week. It's been great talking to you.
Bye.
You can visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/WrestlingRNDup, or our Twitter page, twitter.com/WrestlingRNDup, or our YouTube page, youtube.com/WrestlingRNDup. And we will see you next week.